Hey, hello and welcome to Reanimated episode 244. My name is Stuart. I'm one of your hosts. I'm the California located one. And joining us is the invulnerable H.A. Conrad in New York.
Let's hope so. Welcome, Reanimated fans, to upcoming week 5.5, I guess, of at least for me anyway, of me staying home.
Oh, I guess. This is certainly middle of our week 4 of being at home here. And it's definitely taken a toll. It's like I was training for a 5K and I ended up running a marathon. And I don't like running to begin with. I mean, what's happening? That's not true. I kind of do enjoy it.
I know.
However, Itchy, I wanted to initially acknowledge soberly, the images I saw coming out of New York this week of the graves on Hart Island, is it?
Yep.
I was caught off guard by that. That was, wow.
Well, what they're having to do, because there's been so many deaths, is that there's no place to put them. So it is actually a temporary solution, but they are mass graves. And this is the place where traditionally New York has done this during times of plague and other things. So this was used during the flu pandemic of 1918. I believe it was also used during the typhoid and perhaps the when tuberculosis was going through the city. And so it's, and I know that, I mean, they floated this, but this is not yet happening, but they were saying that if things go really crazy, they will have to use some of the public parkland, Central Park.
Yeah, I've been reading about that.
And this is not, this is temporary for the moment, and then I think the idea is that they would dig them up and let the families collect the bodies, but right now, there is not that capability, and there's been pretty rough things that you just don't even think about. There was a family in Queens, and their the grandmother of that family was collected by an ambulance. They were told she was going to a specific hospital, and they couldn't find her, and they thought maybe she died, but they didn't know, and that was on March 31st. And eventually they tracked her down and found out she had been admitted under her son's name, which is why they couldn't track her, and she had indeed died the same day she went to the hospital. But there's lots of stuff like that. It's just such a massive volume. In the good news category, it does appear that there are fewer ICU admittances. And I think this is because, for the most part, New Yorkers are staying home. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of, if it's a nice day, like today appears to be, I think you're going to see a lot of people out in the parks and things like that. We've been seeing footage of it. We have not been going out, so we are not anywhere, my husband and I are not participating in that.
The only thing I saw that looks kind of sketchy was when Comfort, the U.S. naval ship Comfort, pulled into dock. There was all these people who went to the waterfront.
It's been more than that. So basically, every time there's nice weather, Central Park, Prospect Park, all of the parks are just full of people, and the mask order has I think in some ways made people feel like they're invulnerable. So in some ways it's bad because they're still out there running and biking and doing crazy stuff. And I think you can do that really early in the morning when nobody else is out. But I don't know if you saw that super creepy, I hate to even watch it, but it's basically a video showing the perspiration and respiration droplets of people who are running and biking, and it's a pretty wide distance that they can
That's
travel.
like those heat maps they show from the Dyson hand dryers. I'm like, okay, let's just all take a breath. It just seems so alarmist.
Well, but I don't think it's alarmist. I think it's true. And in fact,
that's assuming that everything that comes off your body is some sort of infected globule, which...
Well, it depends on whether you are infected or not. And the problem is that nobody knows whether they are or not. And so then that really hits that home. And I think it's fine to run and to bike. I think you just have to do it not around other humans. And in Paris, in fact, they have basically told people they can't run. which I think is rough. I think you could say during certain hours maybe you can, but
Run in one of
regardless,
those
I
masks that the super hardcore P90X
yeah, but
people have to work out in.
yeah, but man, I think it would. Have you tried those? And as you know, like because of the fire stuff and everything out there, those N95 masks are no joke to try to breathe through. Regular.
Yeah, since this all started, I basically have become a sedentary lifestyle devotee. There's no working out. There's no time in the day. If I want to work out, it's after 10 p.m. Like that's my chance.
But there are no hours anymore. It's sort of feeling like that. There's no like normal hours. We've definitely been not sleeping the best, and we've been waking up super early today. Case in point, we were up at dawn. And the nice thing about that is that you then can, at least in this neighborhood, then you can walk around because nobody's around. So that was kind of nice to at least get out there. I admittedly have not been out in several days. So that was a nice thing to be able to be out there.
Actually went fishing last week.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, tried to be socially distant, but yeah. It was maybe a
Where?
borderline good decision. It was out on a piece of private property on a winery. They had a pond. Like it's basically an agricultural pond. But yeah, so went out with a neighbor and their two kids and didn't catch anything. We got the kids out of the house and they ran around and threw rocks in a lake, scared all the fish away for a few hours, and then came home and got ticks on them. Every time we go outside, we get ticks now. It's like they're taking over the world because we've stopped going out into it.
Yep. And so whenever you go out, they're like, "We're on you," like white on rice.
Like ticks on
ticks
children.
on a dog.
Yeah.
It's creepy though.
Yeah, ticks are nasty. I don't know.
They've always creeped me out.
I like pulling one out of my daughter a few weeks ago. The way that they bury their head in there and then they just like hold on even after the rest of their body's been ripped off. It's so weird. Anyway.
Yep.
It's grosser than zombies.
Yep.
And let's finish up the corona news, though. We do have the usual breakdown. Today we're at 1.79 million global cases that have been tested. Let's keep that. The real number is probably, I don't know, 5 times that? Something huge. Especially now that it's getting into places that are like third world.
Well, right. And also, even here in the U.S., the testing, the government was kind of like shutting down support for testing. So I think we got to assume that there's lots of people that just haven't been diagnosed. And at least here at the hospitals and everything, they're totally focused on keeping people alive versus, trying to figure out everybody who has it. And there's so many. I think we'll probably have a better idea of numbers if they actually develop an antibodies test. They have not yet successfully. I know in the UK.
All the people who have passed away, like at home, and coroners don't have their access to tests. This thing is the death toll. When we look back at it, we'll be like, oh, there was a spike in deaths that isn't explained by coronavirus, and that's going to be how we figure out how many people have actually died.
At least in New York, they basically, there was a pretty big surge in the numbers of deaths reported, and it wasn't that it was a surge in the actual deaths, it was that they started counting those people that were dying at home. But it is a pretty massive number. If you look at New York State, 182,000 cases and more than 8,000 deaths just in New York State versus California, your state, which basically locked everything down a lot quicker.
Certainly flattened the curve.
To some extent.
I think Californians are just less friendly than New Yorkers. Is that possible?
But it's I think at least New York is just so densely populated, and that's a huge problem. Plus, we also had a lot of communities that were ignoring things and still going to funerals and churches. And
well, today's going to be a day for churchgoers, man.
Yeah, and I think they should not. But anyway, in California, your number of deaths is at just about 700.
2 in my county so far.
Yeah, so let's hope it stays that way and that you guys don't get a surge. I hope so.
Hey, an interesting thing, the Johns Hopkins website, maybe today, started reporting total people tested in the U.S., which they're saying is 2.68 million, with 440,000 of those being in New York, which is pretty cool. That's just a cool thing to be tracking. Apparently, Maine only has tested 6,700 people, but that's probably okay because I don't know what the population of Maine is, but those people are all like, it's like 1 person per 10 miles in Maine or something.
Yeah, it's just not the density as it is here.
Yeah, other cases, other numbers we've got. So after the USA, which is 530,000 cases that are tested positive that we are tracking is confirmed, then the next most cases is in Spain and then Italy. And if you look at their curves, they are certainly looking like they're flattening at the moment.
Yeah. I did see that the UK, they're now predicting the number of deaths are really out of line with,
They
and
were
maybe
tracking
it's
like
again this.
10%
Yeah.
death rate, weren't they?
Yep. And it could be that they are, I don't know. I mean, the testing issues there are similar. And that's actually where they first discovered that the antibodies test that they had come up with didn't work. So who knows? Again, I don't think we're going to get accurate reporting until long after this is done.
Yeah.
When we actually see, you know, the the true numbers, and you're not going to know that until like you take a look back. So we'll see.
When you look at deaths in the last 24 hours, globally we're tracking like 6,000 deaths every day, which
Yep.
is a big number to be taken over, and that has doubled since the last time feel like we talked about this, but that was a few weeks ago. In the U.S., we're looking at about 1,800, and that has gone above 2,000. We had a day of more than 2,000 deaths just this week.
Yeah.
So that's bananas, and those curves are still going up. God, we just have so much more of this ahead of us that it's kind of
I know. Well,
it's discouraging to think about.
yes, we I was going to say the stay home orders have been extending in a lot of places, at least until mid-May. So I think we have quite a bit more to
Oh
go.
man, just looking at all the stuff getting canceled, like Burning Man, which you might not think is any great loss, but it's in August and it was canceled.
Yep.
The Olympics have been pushed to
Well,
next
and
summer, all kinds of things, and I think this is responsible. People deciding,
Yep.
you know what? I'm wondering about the NFL, like if they're going to be able to start their season in August or September. I think it's September, but is that realistic to pack the stadiums, or even just to have
Yeah.
these teams are like 200 people when they're all together, right? Are they gonna? Is that
Yep.
going to be responsible to have all those people working together and spitting in each other's mouths or whatever it is they do?
Well, they had there was some talk about what Major League Baseball was going to do, and like they were like, "Oh, we'll cart them out to Arizona and we'll bring them." And I'm like, I still don't know if that's a good idea to have them, even just the teams together. I don't know that that makes sense. And they were talking about basically airing the games just from the parks without spectators, but I don't know where they're at on that at the moment. But I guess we'll see. I don't know if you saw, and it's probably something. There's a whole 1918 flu documentary that I think is on Netflix. But and this has been coming up a lot. And basically, when the First World War ended, and everybody was kind of sick of staying inside because lots of people had pretty harsh what we're now seeing as social distancing orders in place, and basically everybody came out for the parades, and there was another surge immediately after that. And I think that that's the concern that we all have to be worried about, because I do see people getting really antsy, and I get it, but it's also like there's no getting around it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no sort of like bargaining and just be with a virus and saying, hey, just because we're tired of being inside, we're going to go and have this big crazy thing going on. So I think it remains to be seen what happens, and I hope that the right thing happens, but I do fear that there will be another wave of this in the fall or maybe the early winter.
Yep, more than likely, and we're going to be hashtag living with COVID for a long time. Distancing is going to be a thing that we're going to have to do. And I think that once we start to see a reduction in cases in California, we're probably going to back off of our shelter in place and go to a modified version where businesses and schools can open again, although it'll be probably late summer by the time that happens. So, yay,
Yep.
But we'll still have to be doing physical distancing or whatever you want to call it. And people in vulnerable communities are still going to have to be isolating until there's a vaccine at the very earliest, and that means people will have been inside or in theory, sheltering in place for a year probably.
Yep. And just a note on the schools, there's been a little bit of a tussle
I've
here
seen,
in New York
the mayor and the governor. Ooh.
The governor, and they constantly have this thing going on. I think they both need to stop. And
this is not the time for this kind of push and pull.
Stop. I mean, I think that the decision it has to be made that the schools are not open for the rest of the year. And I point to the fact, I don't know if you have seen this, but there have been a number of New York school teachers that have died.
Oh,
And a lot of them, like a lot of them. And there is like memorials up to them. And you have to think if they had closed the schools down earlier, maybe that would have. And I mean, look, it's New York, and New York is dense, and I'm not definitely not saying that there is causality, but all I can say is that a lot of the kids are not necessarily showing symptoms, and they seem to be recovering pretty easily from this. So when I'm thinking about the schools being reopened, it just seems like a way for this to spread again and spread even further. So I think that that's a good decision to keep them closed for the remainder of the year and then revisit what you're going to do in the fall. So I don't know, and it's still every night at 7 o'clock here in New York, everybody is cheering our healthcare workers on the front lines every single night at 7, because that's when the shift changes, so that hopefully they can hear it. I am hoping at the end of this, maybe we're going to value our healthcare workers and our essential people that keep everything running. We're going to hopefully value them more. I will say that every day, we try to do like a big run of groceries every few weeks, and every time we go, we try to be as nice as possible to the people working there, because they are exhausted. And they're there every day, and they're dealing with a lot of stress, and we do see people not treating them very well.
yeah, we haven't been to the store in 3 weeks here, but we're using like Instacart.
Well, that is just something that we cannot do here, unfortunately. I mean, we can, but it's like you try to do it, and it always gets canceled.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, it takes days for sure. Like you make your order, have more like 60 to 70% of the things you asked for are either completely out or need an alternative. Yeah. So when you see your shopper start shopping, like you get that notification on your phone, you're basically then glued to your phone for the next hour while your shopper goes through the aisles, which is, it's kind of insane.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you to all those people. They're keeping everything running here. So
totally. And you know what? Who I feel really sorry for is the astronauts coming back from the ISS in the next couple days.
Oh, I know, right?
Just like, wait a second. We're going into what? I'm going to be dealing with gravity and what? Those poor humans. Okay. Yep. But we've got some zombie news, so let's do that instead. This is giving me agita. Zombies. This is zombie news. Oh, yes. So remember when we said that the Walking Dead attraction was shutting down in favor of some sort of like Secret Life of Pets thing? Do you remember when we talked about that a few weeks ago?
I do remember, and now this makes a lot more sense.
Well, I wonder if this is related to the litigation that they were facing based on some allegations made by the actors at this place. Have you read the article?
I did, and I saw it when it came out. I meant to flag it for you, so I was glad that you picked this up. It was on my list. But basically, the actors at the attraction at Universal Studios are claiming that the environment created encourages the guests of the park to assault them in physical and sexual ways. They describe being groped, there's somebody who was punched full on in the face. And I will say there is a huge difference between Universal and Disney in that at Universal, you can basically have access to alcohol wherever you go in the park, and Disney does not have that. There's specific places you can drink alcohol, just Epcot, and Disney, downtown Disney, but that's not actually in the park itself. And I will say it does make a difference, I would say, in terms of the tone of the park. And it doesn't shock me that this was happening, but there is now a lawsuit from some of the actors or cast members of this particular exhibit, this attraction. And I have a feeling they will probably settle with them, because I think that they do have grounds, at least from what it sounds like. But we'll see how that goes. I would imagine if they do settle, it will be an undisclosed settlement. But
we'll see. Either way, disturbing, and you don't want to hear about that. But so
No, any more than that. I, it doesn't shock me, but it makes me kind of sad because it's like, come on, those guys are out there. They have to get up in zombie makeup and whatever. They shouldn't have to deal with that stuff too.
no,
But
absolutely not. In other Walking Dead news, no, that's the same article again. There was an announcement of it's a Hollywood Reporter article, which is really inside baseball. It doesn't really tell you anything about the project, but there is a new movie coming out that was based on a spec script, which I don't really know what that means. What does that mean?
they were basically shopping it around because nobody was owning the project, so they're trying to shop it around to see if they could get support for it and maybe start a bidding war.
So what's interesting is they're shopping this around, and it ends up going back to the same production team that put out this guy's last film.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
so it doesn't
anyway,
seem like it was that competitive of a process, maybe.
Yeah. Well, but anyway, it's a pandemic thriller called 16 States, and seems to have a few similarities to what we're dealing with today, though I think maybe they should rename it to All 50 States. So we'll see how this goes. And, I guess we'll get more information as it goes through the process. Let's see what happens with it.
Always happy to hear about a new zombie project in the works.
Yep. And lastly, unfortunately, too late for anybody interested, though I'm sure you could find it somewhere. But Alive, the zombie musical, they actually were streaming this for 24 hours on April 10th, I believe, or April 9th. And there is, at least the link that I provided has an excerpt, like one of the songs, and I will say it is so very Broadway. Did you happen to listen to it at all? It's like...
the YouTube trailer, it was very peppy.
It's very peppy. But anyway, maybe we'll see this come out again. And I know there was some talk that this was going to make its way to Broadway, which I would imagine has been paused given current events. But maybe this is a way to kind of garner some more interest. And there's been actually a lot of things that they've been airing all over the place in terms of Broadway and musicals and things like that. The Jesus Christ Superstar whole performance with John Legend is apparently going to be aired today. So if we're talking original zombies, it'll be there. But I'm curious to see what happens with this. As you know, I'm still hoping for an Anna and the Apocalypse musical. And I think they could probably do it. I think they've got the songs and they've got the wherewithal, but we'll see.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see that. And that's the end of our zombie news, though. So we have 3 episodes of Walking Dead to get through, and we've taken our sweet time getting to them.
All right.
Let's get rid of the worst one first.
All right.
What we become is Denai Guerrera's last episode on the show that we know of. People are now talking about her coming back, and I'm like, what? We haven't? Okay, sure, whatever. This was directed by Sharat Raju and written by Vivian Say, and it came out not too long ago, end of March. And this is Michonne and Virgil going.
Yeah. And it feels like it goes on forever and more of the same forever. And it really kind of bummed me out that this was her farewell episode.
Can't believe
so
that a lot of people agreed that this was the way to get Michonne off the show, man. There are a couple of elements of this that do work, and I mean, this might be, you might not agree with this, HA, but I like some of that retrospective and what if flashback stuff is kind of compelling, especially because they revisit Backpack Guy, that scene of the hitchhiker on the road from way back, season 3 maybe. Like that, some of those scenes, and they bring back old footage of Andrea fighting the zombies, and I was like, yeah, this is actually engaging. But I hate the fact that she had to take peyote or whatever the hell, gypsum weed, to have this trip to get to there, I guess.
Yeah, it was really annoying. I don't like. There's not too much for me to say about this, other than the fact that I think it's just incredibly frustrating to kind of walk through this, and it just kept. It's one of the worst use of flashbacks / hallucinations that I've seen. It's just to me it's a very sloppy storytelling.
When you think of it from Virgil's perspective, he's locked up his potential savior, the person who has just helped him recover the bodies of his wife and children. Very sad. I was really
Right.
feeling for him in that scene before all the tripping started happening. And then he's like, "Oh, I'll just give her some. I'll make her trip like I do all the time." Apparently, which is I guess explains why he's such a spaz, as we were talking about in the last episode he was in. He's a spaz because he's
Yeah.
constantly tripping balls on crazy peyote tea. But he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll just make her trip balls, and then she's gonna see things my way." What?
Well, I think he had a couple of things in mind here. I think he wanted her weekend, um and also because he has sort of because he has gotten some benefit, and he thinks it's actually therapeutic, I think. And also,
Because he calls
let's
it
just say
medicine
he's
during the middle of the trip.
yeah, like I think that, and look, these kinds of LSD and all that kind of stuff were originally used to help people deal, and they've had some success under controlled uh conditions where it's helped people with PTSD
Sure.
and
Yeah,
other
but she's not
mental health
microdosing in
issues.
this scenario. She is
Well,
taking a full
not
sheet of
oh,
tabs.
she is taking a full sheet of tabs. She's also dehydrated. She is hungry. She is
She's in a cell.
definitely
She's not set up for a good trip.
no. So I don't know why he thought this would end up, but I think he's scared of her and scared of her power, and
Well,
that's part of it too.
I would be too, but then they do this thing to her in this show where, yeah, she gets locked in the cell, and she's like, "Oh gosh darn it, Virgil, you tricked me," and then she falls asleep so hard that he's able
Yep.
to take her sword off of her and put a tray of
Yeah.
food down. And her sword is not just like next to her, it's around her shoulders. Like he'd have to yank it
Yeah.
around her arm. And
Yeah.
she sleeps through that?
Yeah, I doubt that. And we know Michonne well enough to know
Nobody
that.
who's 7 years into the zombie apocalypse sleeps that deeply, I have a feeling.
Yep. So I don't have too much to say about this episode other than it's basically showing it's a very twisted, it's a wonderful life the sequence of things, which is like, what would happen if you had like let Andrea, you were all selfish, looked after yourself, and went off with Negan, and they basically put her into
Yeah.
the basically executioner role for Negan and make her part of the saviors. And it's basically a total, alternate path for Michonne. And, she basically, she basically comes through this, and she's the one who ends up killing Glenn and Abraham and them. And when she comes to, you don't know exactly where she's ended up, in terms of where this vision came from, but she talks a lot to the people through the wall, the other people that are captured by Virgil, and, manages to take care of Virgil and free the other people, and basically convinces the other people not to kill Virgil. But I kind of feel like she would not have been successful in this endeavor, just as a feeling.
We don't really know how long they were in there, I guess. But they're certainly very murderous, considering he's had them locked up and has been feeding them.
Well, I think it's just that feeling that, he's... And I mean, look, there's some sympathy, because basically the reason why Virgil went around the bend is that he had freaked out and panicked because there was, like, basically some walkers in a building or the garage where his wife and family were, and that's why they died, and that's part of why he went around the bend. So at least there's some empathy for him for that.
It's fairly understandable, because he's ultimately responsible for their death by flipping out, spazzing, and locking the doors to the building before anybody had turned, was the way I understood it. Like maybe there was an injured bleeding person who was like, shut it down, and led to his family and looks like maybe a few other people offing themselves in a back room. But the way that scene was pretty cool. Like, he picks up that gurney thing and is just like cowering in a corner, and you can hear Michonne doing work off camera. And then the camera, you get to see it from Virgil's perspective, and it's just Michonne standing there among all those bodies. And I thought that was pretty badass. Michonne is still a badass character. It's just that they went off the rails this episode, with the ultimate disservice being the end of this episode, when they make Judith be the one who persuades her to abandon her two children and go off in search of Rick. And then
Yeah.
later on in this recap, we're going to talk about how Judith is actually crushed by this. And it's like, well, writers, make up your
Yeah.
minds. Either she's proud of her mommy for going to find the brave man, or she's actually just a child who wants a parent who isn't going to abandon her or die.
Right.
Um,
And and let's also just talk about the evidence
the
that
Scrimshaw
Michonne
cell
is
phone,
basing. Yeah, so she's got a cell phone. It's got herself and Judith
like
etched in
modern
it.
day
She's got
images of them, not from
yep,
5 years ago.
right, and you've also got the boots,
Yeah.
and we still. I mean, look, she's basing this on just finding his stuff. Virgil did not actually see Rick alive. This is just on this ship. So there's no way to know whether somebody scavenged this stuff. I mean, I think we can agree based upon the phone part that he was alive after the bridge blowing up, but we don't actually really know that. And so anyway, she's using this to basically go on a hero's quest to find Rick. And her instinct is initially to come back to Judith, but Judith, you're right, she's the one who convinces her, and then later we find out how totally devastated Judith is about it.
It doesn't make any sense,
but
man.
It doesn't make sense.
Also, what parent? And RJ is a child of her own loins.
Correct.
She's not
Like,
going to do
what
this.
are you doing? Also, she's not going to do this because Rick's no longer here, right? So there's nobody, as much as she trusts Daryl.
And it's the middle of a war. She's like, people are counting on me to get back to my community. Right. At the beginning of the episode, she's like, Virgil, we got to get going. I got to get back. People are waiting. I got to help.
Because remember, the whole reason was that she was supposed to get munition to go and help her people. And so anyway, I find this all to be a little bit of a very muddy story of ending Michonne on the show. So hopefully, I actually do hope she comes back, because I just think this is a pitiful way to send her off.
It's a total disservice. Apparently the Japanese characters on the cell phone mean believe a little bit longer. Rick, believe a little bit longer. And then here's a picture of your wife and daughter, even though... Well, this suggests that somebody's been spying on the community from whoever has him. I guess.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, so there's that. And then the end of this episode has her finding a whole troop of people. So that's sort of how it ends. So there's a whole nother thing. I will admit, when I first saw her come upon them, I thought that this might be the community that Stephanie was potentially from.
Okay.
So I didn't, that it was just my thought, but probably not, because they're marching out somewhere, but who knows?
Everybody who's read the books is like waiting with holding their breath for the Commonwealth to show up. This is a part of the comics that I never read, so I don't really know how this unfolds. I guess they're maybe from the center of the country and they have stormtroopers. Like, this is what I know about the Commonwealth.
They're supposed to be from Ohio, and I think Stephanie is supposed to be from that group, but
and we'll find out.
Anyway, so we'll see, maybe or maybe not. But onwards
out of this episode, man. Yeah, it's just disappointing. You know, it's Michonne, dude. Give her a. I mean, it just feels selfish at the end of the day. They're like, well, we can't kill her off because we want to use her in the movies or some other spinoff. How do we get a mother to abandon her children? There's no good way, unless it's against her will, and they didn't want to, for whatever reason, have her be hoodwinked or shanghaied or something like Rick was, because it would have been too repetitive. But how else do you get parents to abandon their children? Like, good parents,
right?
Either way, moving on.
I just felt like there needed to be more evidence that he was alive.
It was weak.
Fine. It was very weak. And so it's very weak to be a bit like, I think it would take an enormous amount, like some sort of something.
Like a photo.
Some letter from him, something to her or whatever to have her abandon her kids. Even then, I think it's still weak, but at least it would be a little bit better. In any case.
Look at the flowers. What a cool callback for an episode title.
Mika and I forget
Lizzie.
the other little kids.
Lizzie and Mika. But Look at the Flowers was directed by Daisy von Scherler-Meyer and then written by Channing Powell, which is a very familiar name from the writer's room, I think. And then this takes us right back to like what's going on after the 2 episodes ago ended, right? So it starts off with Negan and Carol. He's, it's actually a flashback, right? It's when she went to his cell, which I'm glad we get to see this scene because this, retcon is the original first meeting between Carol and Negan and the vibes that they have between them in this room. I'm no longer shipping them, which is unfortunate. I really had hopes for that, but I don't think that that's where it's going to go.
No, in fact, I think if anything, they're still kind of shipping Daryl and Carol, but I know, which just doesn't stop.
In this conversation between Negan and Carol, he, for some reason, inexplicably, is talking like a cowboy. Did you notice a twang?
Yeah, it was like a twang and very strange. But in any case, everything about the plan is revealed, and she's pissed that he took so long, and he's just kind of like, I had to get her trust and get her alone and get her away from Beta. Like, I did the best I could.
I really like the way that this "you took too long" theme unfolds between Carol and later with Daryl. It's just, and him having to defend himself against it multiple times. You might think that would be like tired or old, but it doesn't. It's just freaking...
Well, it's also that theme versus the fact that he then has to deal with Lydia later.
Yeah. Oh man!
So it's interesting. Like the whole thing is kind of
these
interesting.
Two episodes are good. Am I right? I mean, they're really good interactions between.
But there's a couple obvious. Well, I'll get into my critiques about the next one. Okay.
So then Carol reneges on her deal, which was, I'm going to bring you into Alexandria like freaking Caesar at his triumph after conquering Gaul. But no, right. Instead she says, I have to go spend some alone time, and just walks away.
Well, and I mean, he doesn't know all the stuff sort of behind this, but
this is a total choice for her. She could go back. She doesn't have to go off and bury herself under a canoe in a shed.
First of all, she's still feeling very guilty about the Connie and the other people from when she led them in there. Secondly, I think she's really scared to admit to Daryl that she had this whole plan going on, because had she revealed that in the first place, none of them would have been running out after Alpha and the Horde in the first place. And then she's also, part of why what took you so long is that, Negan did. I mean, again, I don't know. There is a bit of a question about whether he was waiting so long because he was kind of enjoying being like the right hand man of somebody and being an important part of the community, which he does admit to later. But basically, a lot of people died. A lot of people died because of that surge of the Horde.
Yeah, when Daryl talks about that later, Daryl's like, oh, a bunch of kids almost died because of you. And I'm like, yeah, and a lot of adults actually did die, Daryl.
And I mean, and so the thing is that, like, I definitely think that there is a little bit of that, like, why you took so long. However, had Carol revealed that she basically had an inside agent, and I get that they're not sure if they're still spies, and I understand that, but even so, if she'd revealed to even the inner circle what was going on, they could have all like prepared or gotten away safely or done something, and just waited until he killed off Alpha. But by not revealing that, she feels responsible for all those
deaths. I will
deaths.
grant you
and I think
that it's a pickle, and based on this scene with Eugene that happens pretty much next, yes, telling the group anything that they weren't in on apparently triggers them like crazy, and they all spaz out.
Yep.
Because when Eugene admits to having radio communications with Stephanie, people like Yumiko and I forget who else is like, what? Who? How? Wait, what?
Yeah.
And then it takes Ezekiel, who is his badass self again, to be like, guys, let's hear him out. Eugene's speech is extremely emotional, and at first I was like, why? And then I was like, oh yeah, their house just got burned down, and they're all feeling a little bit traumatized.
And I like how Rosita's no help at all. She just like leans back on the couch
what the
and
hell
like
happened to
raises
her anyway? Why is she so beat up?
And raises her perfectly shaped eyebrows, which I'm gonna mention. There's a lot of perfectly shaped eyebrows.
And hair.
Miko. Yeah. And Magna, I mean, yeah, they're a little dirty, but they still look pretty well.
Kelly's hair is basically a high maintenance fade haircut. How are they doing fades in a non-electric, no electric power? Ezekiel is like the only Ezekiel and Eugene are the only two people with realistic hair, I think, and Michonne, I guess.
Right. And I mean, I'm just gonna jump in here and say, after X number of weeks of pretty civilized social isolation and whatever, I know you've probably seen all of our friends and colleagues posts, and people are like, I don't know if I'm going to shower this week, or you know,
Yeah.
like, and this is in a circumstance where you have access to showers and hot water and stuff, and we're talking about communities that have limited access to those sorts of
But
things.
these people want to keep
let
on
alone
boning
mirrors.
each other, so that's why they maintain their eyebrows,
Maybe.
I guess. And that's less of an option in the social distancing world.
Yep, and you know, just saying, haircuts not as easy as you think they are without electricity.
I've seen
out there.
pretty great attempts at making bangs, yeah, since this all kicked off.
Yep.
But yeah, so you know, this is the hair thing and the way people dress. Like Yumiko right now is dressed like a pirate, like with like some high water waist jeans with lots of buttons, and then a frilly, not a frilly, but like a billowy shirt. She looks totally like a pirate. But so what comes out of Eugene's emotional speech about Stephanie is, I want to go find a new group of people, because obviously our community keeps shrinking. You know, we're down 2 of our 4 communities, and so Ezekiel and Yumiko go with him. But at first it's like Jerry's gonna go, but there's a little back and forth, and maybe Magna's gonna go. Actually, I don't think Jerry was ever gonna go. Either way, there's a bunch of back and forth. And eventually they're like, yes, we are the delegation, and they ride away into the wilds.
And then, you know, and then the other story themes here, we're following Carol, she's just having Alpha basically, you know, she's hallucinating Alpha, basically giving her a big old guilt trip, which is herself giving herself a guilt trip.
I was not ready for more hallucinations after the Michonne episode.
No.
So I was
like, haven't we done enough of this?
How many people actually have hallucinations in their lifetime that are this realistic?
Apparently here, Rick, Carol, Michonne, everybody. But in any case, Carol, you know, we have a throwback. We see this whole, like, sort of like another vision quest, basically, where she, you know, is trapped under this crazy canoe because she's trying to escape, and ultimately she dislocates her shoulder to kill off the walker that's about to kill her, and decides she's not going to hallucinate Alpha anymore because she wants to live and wants to go back to the community. And it turns out the thing she's most afraid of is abandonment by Daryl, I guess.
But then when she sees him,
and
she walks past him at the gate of Alexandria, and it's like no big deal. Another amazing collection of scenes in this episode is Beta coming upon Alpha's detached head on a spike. He's with 2
letting her like bite another follower, and he's
with these 2 whisperers, and one of them makes the age-old whisperer mistake of speaking, and I think he calls Beta Alpha or something along those lines. And Alpha then is like, can you hear what she's saying? And it's a really slow motion zombie bite to the face that luckily one of the whisperers turns out to not be an idiot and runs away.
I do like how the whisperer just kind of takes a look and runs as fast as that whisperer can. It's kind of like, well, yeah, that's what you should have done in the first place.
This only underscores the fact that there should be no more whisperers. And they do you know, allude to this in the next episode, where they come across a whisperer who has abandoned the horde and is like, I'm off on my own. Beta's crazy now. But he still has so many, it seems like he still has dozens of loyal followers, and it's like, why?
Yeah. And now, of course, this is the episode that makes clear, because we've had a couple of, like, first, when Alpha first takes the mask, the original, like, ski mask off of Beta when she first meets him, and she kind of has this, like recognition and, like, oh, huh. And then we see another person that asks him, oh, who are you? This person.
You.
And it turns out he is apparently a famous country singer, though I will say his songs are really bad.
Do you think that was Ryan Hurst's voice?
Probably, because, you know, everybody sings on this show.
Guess so.
But he was a performer named Half Moon or something like that, and we come across a place where I think he had been holed up at some point. It has instruments. It has a note he wrote to himself, I think, at some point, maybe.
I wonder how he got from this backwoods place to whatever city he was in when he met up with Samantha Morton and young Lydia.
He goes through also through somewhat of a weird moment in time where he's blasting his country music of terrible lyrics and gathers a horde to him, and then he offs Alpha's walker head and sews her half of the face to his mask, And then we see him going off for revenge.
And when he
And
walks out of that building after having blasted music and collected a horde, and he just kind of walks out into them, and he pushes past them even, and then they just turn around and
yeah,
follow him, and I'm like, this feels too easy. Like, why could
agreed.
Negan couldn't get one zombie to follow him? You know, it was, and all Beta has to do is kind of just stroll into a crowd of them against the stream. And first of all, they don't think
Well,
that
and you would
that's
think.
weird, and they're not going to eat him. And secondly, why do they just turn around? I don't know. It bothered me a little bit how easy it was.
Well, it bothered me mainly because if he had like basically kind of jumped or gotten into the horde like from a window or something rather than opening a door and because basically they react to anything that's out of the ordinary,
Yeah,
right?
usually.
So like a force of, and I mean, I don't know, maybe he still smells enough like them, but it does feel like it was enough out of the ordinary that it would have set some of them off. So I agree with you. It seemed a little crazy, but I guess we just got to deal with it. So there's that.
There's a lot of scenes between Negan and Daryl. Negan pleading for his life after Daryl has found Lydia, I guess, and is waiting for Negan in the shed. Almost kills him several times. Negan manages to talk his way out of it. There's a really cool scene with when the Whisperers show up and are like, "Oh, you killed Alpha, you're Alpha now." I love this whole setup.
Negan's playing it to the hilt and ultimately kills the Whisperers. But the best part is when Daryl is like, he's had the Whisperers tie up Daryl, and then at the end of it, after he kills them, Daryl's like, "One time you did,"
Yeah.
or whatever, and it's pretty funny. And then I forgot the last part of this whole journey is the Eugene, Miko, Ezekiel trio, and they run into a new survivor who has a bit of a crazy sense of humor. They kind of are walking through this city, and they see these little like tableaus set up with walkers where they're like having cocktails, getting traffic tickets,
Sitting in rocking
like
chairs.
that kind of
It's,
thing.
yeah, it's very it's the kind of stuff that Will Smith was doing in that video store in I Am Legend, where he's dressing up mannequins and having conversations, and you get the impression that this survivor has been probably having conversations with zombies.
Yeah, and this is Juanita Princess Sanchez.
Yeah, we don't learn her name until the next episode. This episode just ends with her running up. She's got a big ass saw M249 machine gun, purple jacket and goggles. She looks like Kangaroo Girl. Was it? No, Tank Girl. You ever seen that?
A little like
A
Tank
bit
Girl.
Tank Girl.
She's got like very bubblegum, like she's got like dyed
Yeah.
hair and perfectly groomed eyebrows again. And so there's that. That's sort of where it starts off in the next episode, which is the tower, and that's directed by Laura Belzy, written by Kevin Diebolt and Julia Bruckman. And so this oscillates between our trio, Eugene, Ezekiel, and Miko, and also the whole standoff between Beta and the rest of the survivors.
Yeah, that's probably my beef about this episode is how that unfolded. The Beta stuff, he's off his rocker, he's hearing voices, zombies are talking to him, which I actually did kind of enjoy that, but I also just want them to eat him because he does things now like he's in a horde and he raises his hands up on either side of him. He's not even pretending really to be a zombie anymore. He's
Right.
pretending to be some sort of like zombie lord hybrid. And either way,
Right.
it's annoying.
I say we tackle the trio
Yeah.
first, just because I think
It's
it's
more
a pretty
fun.
quick. Yeah, but it's also a pretty quick take on
Yeah.
it, and basically they've got Princess, and she's definitely crazy from being alone. And she is implying that she's got access to weapons, but she manages to scare off their horses. And
She implies that she
look,
has
she's-
access to hair dye, food, a place to go swimming, which I loved.
Yep.
She just gets on a roll with her dialogue, and I think she's very well written, and she comes across as manic, yes, but also hilarious. And we haven't had a character on the show who's like this in a while. Like, nobody can maintain this level of happy exuberance.
And she's been totally alone, so that's a little bit. She just doesn't even. In part, she thought that she was hallucinating them because she's been alone that long. But then she's kind of like, it's kind of funny because she's acting like, well, if I'm not hallucinating them, maybe I can like make them my friends and whatever. So she after scaring off their horses because she shoots a bunch of zombies around the horses, she tells them she's got access to wheels, lots of wheels, and takes them on this total wild goose chase, including through a minefield. And that whole thing was just absolutely insane. And Miko is obviously skeptical and says that she's selfish and crazy. And Ezekiel's like, well, let's see what the girl's got. And there's some really funny interactions between all of them.
I mean, she's basically a little bit like a female Jerry. So I can see why Zeke would be, attracted to interacting with her. Also, she's the princess and he's the king, and there's a very funny line where she's like, "Well, I could have been queen, but that sounds pretentious." And there's a look. I love that. I basically love everything about her and interacting with Ezekiel. However, in the last episode, there was kind of a farewell scene between Jerry and Ezekiel where Jerry finally calls him Ezekiel, which basically means that he's going to be dead by the end of this season. I mean, we know that already. He's got cancer, unless he finds a oncologist or something in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, we know he's probably done for, and they've hinted at that in the last episode, just because he's short of breath. He has a moment where he almost isn't able to do in a walker, and he has moments where he tells Miko and Eugene to go on without him, and they're like, absolutely not. So I think he likes the refreshing entrance of the princess, just because it
does buck him up a little, right?
Yeah, and she's a true believer, and she's managed to survive. So in addition to her kind of madcap ways, she is also a survivor. So there's that too. But there is like the whole thing where this whole episode shows her leading them through all these different things, including the minefield, and then when they eventually end up on Fleetwood Drive, where Eugene's like, we have been here before, and she tries to like cover and say, no, we haven't. And
I really like this interaction between the two of them, because Eugene actually has been really second fiddle to Yumiko and Ezekiel throughout this whole journey. He doesn't have much to say, it seems. And then when she's like, I just wanted you guys to not leave me alone, and so I kind of made something up, he's like, oh, I resemble that remark. That's like my entire origin story for The Walking Dead. And then he puts his hand on her shoulder, and it's very sweet. And so I really enjoyed that. Even though he was mad at her, he was like, no, I have been you.
and welcome. And then when ultimately the garage that has the wheels is a garage full of bicycles, that is funny.
Hilarious. But it also, I feel like I have brought this up before. Why aren't more people riding bicycles in the apocalypse? And hopefully now we will see a rise, a surge in bicycle riding, except that asphalt is falling apart, so it might not work out long term. But
right, and we kind of leave this group where Miko invites Princess to go along with them, and then of course Princess, it's almost like they all kind of are like, oh, are we going to regret this decision? Because she's immediately like, can we go and get my stuff? Can I carry the map? Can I do this? She's definitely like that person in the group, and it's
so good.
There's some raised, perfectly coiffed eyebrows.
There's going to be a lot of those, scene. And a lot of wry smiles and chuckles, and that's great. So I'm really happy with the way that story is progressing. It's an awkward time to leave that storyline, but this is episode 15, and we're not getting a 16 until who knows when. So, but it's, what this episode does, it almost could work as a season finale. Almost. Yep. Almost.
It really bummed me out at the end of this, realizing that we just don't know when the rest is going to air, but what can you do? Yeah. So we go back to the Alexandria group. They're all hiding out in this hospital called the Tower.
Except for Alden and Aaron, who are hiding in the windmill.
And not doing a very good job.
This was my big critique.
This is my big critique. It's like, why would you even need to go to the window?
Yeah.
You don't need to go to the window. You just need to listen to them. And, not only could the Whisperers who are on that windmill, like, potentially see you, which apparently they do, there's a ton of them in the crowd. You don't know who's a Whisperer and who's not. Just stay away from the window. If this is your plan to be a spy, you got to be a little bit more stealth, and you should know better by now. So that just really annoyed me.
Aaron is not great at being sneaky. I guess he has been in the past, but Alden, we have no history of him being sneaky. He's a blacksmith. I don't know. Yeah. He's a blacksmith, former savior, probably the last former savior now that Laura's dead. But
Yeah.
it's so I don't know why those two were chosen for this mission, because as the show goes on, it's more and more apparent that they have no idea how to hide or be stealthy. They need
Right.
ghillie suits or something. They need some kind of camo. They're just wearing their like Gap clothes.
Right. And they're just like kind of following the horde, which is
And by
massive.
the
And
end,
how
they're
would
not
they even?
following it. They're walking like next to it and only like 20
Yeah.
feet away. And I was just like, oh, they're clearly about to get caught. And then, oh yes, then they do.
Yes. And there we see Beta doing the stuff that you talked about before, not acting like a walker, but hearing walkers talk to him. He's hearing voices in his head.
Threatening to murder more
Another
of his
walk
followers.
Another whisperer makes a mistake of implying that he's alpha, and he almost kills that person, but then goes a little crazy, and that particular whisperer is the one that runs off. And they're going towards Oceanside, but he keeps making these weird comments like, "Oh, the path is not clear," and that kind of thing. We don't know exactly what the voice in his head is saying.
Why
Maybe
does he
it's
have
just
this intuition? I'm tired of whisperers winning just because, for no reason. Like, our survivor heroes are really they've made a plan. We don't really still know what their plan is. It was to lure them to Oceanside and then somehow kill the horde and the rest, whatever's left of them. I thought, but we never really see what that is, and that's part of the trope of hiding the hero's plan. That is what ensures that it's a successful plan. I guess maybe we knew too much about it because we had Alden and Aaron there to ruin it. But I don't know what their plan was, but it clearly did not include or involve Beta and the Horde coming back to this hospital where they're hiding. And then when you go inside this hospital earlier in the episode, it's crazy cool just to see all these different characters in this new set. I don't know why I thought this was so cool, but it's like, oh, there's Lydia and she's petting a cat. And then several scenes later, there's Lydia and she's petting a dog. There's Judith, there's Carol, there's Negan. Daryl's never really in there, I guess. But there's Jerry, there's Diane, there's Gabriel. And it's just cool to see them all. I don't know why I thought that was interesting. It's like we haven't seen them all in one place in a while.
It's cool to see them in one place. Also cool because Negan obviously has been accepted back to some extent, except obviously by Lydia. And he's trying to make amends with her and deal with that conflicted thing that she's having, which is that her mom's dead, but her mom is nuts. And Negan does do a pretty good. Those scenes between them are really good. He knows he can't make it up to her, but he also does want to somehow make it up to her and comfort her.
Telling her that I liked your mom, and also he banged her mom. I don't know. I don't feel like he has a leg to stand on.
He doesn't tell her that.
No, but still, we all know it. It's just weird.
We know it. And then I do think Negan admired her mom despite the craziness, because they did have some similarities, and there's that. And but I do like the scene between them when he eventually comforts her and hugs her, and she hits him and feels better, I suppose.
What do you suppose was the point behind this hospital is full of cats?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure what is going on there, but that's a new thing we have not. It's sort of like, where have all the cats gone? I thought they ran away. Apparently all at the hospital. And the hospital smells like pee, which is why Judith runs away. Is that, I don't know, is that supposed
they
to
just
give
keep.
her a
There's like a
reason to
thread
run
of
away?
cats and cat pee throughout this episode. Like a cat is what kind of clues Beta into where they are somehow. It's just there's a lot of cat stuff, and it's not. It's like, where did this even come from? I thought cats were gone, maybe. So it's weird. We also have an interesting, I would say, a good scene between Kelly and Carol. Carol goes out on a mission for Luke, who apparently holds the future of everybody in his hands. I'm not sure where that came from. What?
Nope.
But Carol goes out on a mission.
Suddenly he's doing radio stuff and other stuff, and I don't know where that came from.
Who the hell
either.
knows? He's the master of the good guys plan TM that we will never know the extent of until episode 16. But Carol and Kelly have this conversation. Connie's still in the wind, right? We don't know where she is. She got lost in the attack on Hilltop.
No.
She might be dead, but Kelly says no. This is when I noticed Kelly's haircut is still a little bit too tight.
Yeah, it looks good.
But she's this conversation they have about like me losing my hearing wasn't a disability, it was my superpower. Your superpower, Carol, is apparently that you go off and don't tell anybody what you're doing, and you take care of business, and you shouldn't stop that just because bad things happen. I'm like, well, Kelly, when somebody has a habit of going off and doing their own thing, and then suddenly they're getting people killed because of it, I'm not sure that that's a superpower anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point, and thought the same thing.
I mean, it's a nice pep talk for Carol. She's trying to get her to, believe in herself again. but
Right.
not sure.
Yeah. And then we've got the whole horde turning towards the tower inexplicably. And then, as you said, Aaron and Alden have been following a little too closely, and suddenly, without question, really quickly gets surrounded by whisperers.
Who were all around them. Okay, so one thing I will say is the final scene of this episode, Beta is walking up to the hospital with a bunch of zombies. You don't really see any other whisperers with him. Maybe there are some. There was a specific look between Aaron and whoever had that rifle in his face that made me wonder if maybe this is a splinter group of whisperers who have Aaron and Alden.
It could be.
Because there's something about that rifle. It was very iconic.
Well, iconic, and also they don't show who's holding it.
Exactly. So
yeah. Maybe they infiltrated the Whisperers like the Whisperers infiltrated
who's
them.
Who's even left? There are no more Whisperers that we know of. 2 more Whisperers had speaking lines in this episode, a man and a woman on the windmill. And amazingly, they weren't murdered by Beta right after they spoke. So I don't know if this represents...
Oh, and we should probably also talk about the Daryl Judith moment, because that's where the other Whisperer that we see in this episode.
And these were good scenes. This is where she admits how depressed and broken up she is about Michonne leaving. She actually tells Daryl for the first time that Michonne isn't coming back.
Yep, and I actually do like... There's a whole scene where they come across this Whisperer who's trying to get away, and Daryl shoots her, and Judith is upset by the fact that that the Whisperer doesn't know anything, but he then offs her.
That's pretty cool. Right in front of Judith.
Yeah, but they, look, they can't have her become a walker, and he leaves her in the ditch, but it's not like they really can't do anything. And then this spurs the heart to heart. Yeah. One of the things I liked about this conversation, though, is that Judith basically is asking Daryl for a promise never to leave her, and he's like, I can't say that because I can't lie. And this is the world we live in. And so I do like that exchange between them. And he also knows that Judith knows better. So that's definitely, that was a cool scene between them. But as it turns out, because they are out in the wild, they are not in the tower when all this is going down. And they hear the sort of weird communication from Aaron or not. And then from Gabriel. And
so this means we have 6 goodies outside the wire. We've got Aaron and Alden, who may or may not be captured. We've got Judith and Daryl, and we've got Carol and Kelly, are all out of the outside, not including our people who are out with Princess. So those 4, maybe 6 good guys will be what's required to turn the tables on Beta, in theory, and our friends with our friends back in the hospital, which we've never seen or heard of before, which is a little weird to bring like a new base of operations into this episode here. And that leads us to the final episode 16, which who knows when that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's still TBD on Wikipedia and still TBD in general. So as we know, they weren't able to finish off the season, so we'll see what happens. I'm still hoping that maybe they release the next episode, but we'll see.
You got to wonder how much work could there have been. We're still having other shows are still releasing episodes, and I don't know if that's just because they do production in such different ways. I'm really hoping Westworld continues because I'm really enjoying that, and that's been pretty steadily releasing on Sunday nights. And I don't think that they've announced a delay. Maybe they have. And that season was pretty early on. I feel like they were maybe 5 episodes of Westworld out.
I don't know. Maybe they had just editing and other stuff to do with these that we don't know about.
Or it's a super CGI heavy episode because there's a big crowd of walkers, and they have to have to shop that out to another studio or something. Either way, we'll find out eventually. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Because California is ahead of they're doing this in Atlanta, but you don't know where their post production's happening. If they're in Georgia, it could take longer. Not to throw shade at Georgia, but. California, I think, will probably go into phase 2 of loosening restrictions probably sooner than some other places.
Yeah. So we're going to pause on this, and we'll pick this back up when it comes back to us, hopefully. And in the meantime, next up, we are going to be watching and enjoying Kingdom, the second season.
Yeah, baby.
And we're going to do 2 episodes at a time. So that will be up for next week.
But yeah, so looking forward to Kingdom. In the meantime, let us know what you think about this season so far of Walking Dead. I think we're mostly really enjoying it. the Michonne farewell episode was a misstep. You can't be right and win all the time, Angela Kang. It's unfortunate, but it's true. But let us know what you think. Reanimated PCast on Twitter, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com on the Gmails. And you know where our website is. It's reanimatedpodcast.com, and that's where our show notes are. And that's where you can listen to all of our podcasts all the way back to episode 1.
Indeed. And until next time, everybody stay safe and be well.
Yeah.
Chat.
Bye.